go ahead and get started. It's really neat to have a room full of people, especially a lot of young people here this evening. It's great. I really love that. We are blessed this evening to have Andy and Julie Lehman share with us. And I've been looking forward to this evening for quite some time. Let's come on up here.
Norman. It's Julie.
It's Valentine's Day, so I was thinking of you. Sorry, Julie. I want to just have a word of prayer, and then we're going to get started right away. Father, we are so grateful this evening for your Spirit that is here and very present right now. I just thank you for this opportunity and for this time to listen to life experiences and to grow and share in it. We just trust that your words will be spoken this evening and that the honor will go to you. I just pray this in your name. Amen. Here's a mic for you.
Okay, so everybody keeps asking me if I'm nervous, and generally I don't get nervous until I stand up and get out of my seat. So that really broke the ice. Thanks, Norm. That worked out well. So Andy and I are youth sponsors, middle school youth sponsors. So usually we're down in that wing with all of these guys. So it's kind of fun for us to be here with adults, but to also get to bring the middle schoolers with us. After we just spent the whole weekend with most of them. And now we've had a little bit of sleep to catch up for what we missed and be here. So, Andy and I are going to just kind of take turns back and forth through our growing up years, sharing a little bit about our journey with the Lord, and then after we got married, and then kind of the journey that we're still on now. So,
I'll start since I'm older.
You can start since you're older.
Okay. So I was born right here in Elkhart County, and shortly thereafter, moved to Illinois. My dad got a job in Illinois, and so we moved our family there. I was really close with my family. We had a great relationship. My dad and I like to be ornery and sneak in places that we probably shouldn't have been, and we were pretty close to each other. Our family was a Christian family growing up. We went to church, so kind of, I guess, by osmosis. I would have considered myself a Christian at that point, just because my family was, and that's what I did every week. And then at age 7 is when I actually decided to give my life over to Christ. I don't know that I fully understood that at that point, but I knew what God did for me, and I knew that I wanted to follow Him. And so at age 7, I gave my life over to Christ, and then
Okay.
Julie's turn.
All right, and so Andy is older than me. So about 4.5 years after Andy was born, I was born here in Elkhart County also. Unlike Andy, I have lived in Elkhart County my entire life. And so I'm the oldest of 4 girls, so I have the pretty typical oldest daughter personality traits. Tend to be a worrier, tend to be pretty dependable and reliable. And so grew up with a lot of girls around, and that was awesome. I think it was probably the best family setup that I could have had. Came from a good family, like Andy's family also. Went to church every week, really involved in our church life, and my grandma also would travel and share her testimony with small groups of women all across the Midwest. And these groups that she would go to would also have a singer or a group of singers come and perform at the same time. And so my sisters and I all took piano lessons and voice lessons. And so once we were kind of old enough to go with her, we started to travel with her when we could. And so that was kind of fun to be able to get away, get out of school for a few days to go and visit someplace and hear my grandma share her heart and her testimony, and really just grew up having a good understanding of the gospel, of what Jesus had done for me because of that, but really hadn't understood the fact that I need to re-ask Him into my heart every time I went with her, that that, he loved me for me, and his sacrifice was enough for me. I needed to accept it one time and didn't need to keep asking for that over and over. So grew up with that. However, I at school didn't really have a whole lot of friends. I was more shy, more quiet. And so when I was in the second grade, my mom specifically started praying that I would have one good friend. And the first day of the third grade, a new girl moved in to our school district, and she and I clicked, and her name is Amanda, and she and I are still really, really good friends, and she will be an integral part of my story later on. So I wanted to introduce her early into the story because she is one person that I can look at in my story and know, like, God really was in the details of my life and still is.
So fast forward a little bit to middle school. I kind of, this last weekend with being in the middle school and having, going on the retreats and stuff, reminded me a lot of what I did in middle school. I was involved, we did a lot of retreats, both summer and winter retreats. So like last weekend with the retreat was like right up my alley. When I was at summer camp one summer in middle school, we were outside playing volleyball after dinner, and the camp dean came up and said, "Hey, your dad's on the phone. He needs to talk to you." And that was kind of weird to me because, like, my dad's not supposed to call, in my camp. Like, I get letters and stuff from my family, but I don't know why my dad's calling. So I talked to him, and I found out that my mom had just been diagnosed with stage 3 breast cancer. And this really rocked my world. Shook me a little bit in my faith, because I didn't know what that meant. I didn't know, and at that time looking back, I didn't know what that meant. But in that time, stage 3 cancer was kind of like a death sentence, and I didn't realize that at the time, and that was probably a good thing. During this time, my mom went through chemotherapy, and my family leaned heavily on my extended family here in Indiana. So there'd be weekends that I would come here and spend the weekend in Indiana, hanging out, and just getting to know, hanging out with my family here in Indiana. Well, my mom was really, really sick. So a lot of the details during that point, like, I was spared from, because I didn't really know what all that meant. I knew it wasn't good, but I didn't know what all that meant.
And so my middle school years continued to be a time where I had that one really good friend, and was still just painfully shy and incredibly insecure, probably not that different from most girls in middle school. And most of the time I felt like, whether I was at school or whether I was with my youth group, that I could have just blended in with the wall. That I could have been there or I could have not. My mom is laughing, guys, because it's so true. Because it was just like, I was just there, but, was too scared to even talk sometimes. And so it wasn't until I was in 7th grade and was a part of a small group within my youth group that another adult outside of my family saw me and really loved me for who I was and started to pour into my life. And so that was a really changing moment for me. I can remember the very first, it was a fall retreat that we went on where she was my small group leader. And I had another friend from the youth group that was kind of similarly, had a similar personality to me. And so we were just saying, like, I don't feel like these other girls really like us. And I'm not even sure that I would want to be their friend if they were to, offer their friendship. And, like, she was the first person that on the spot, like, literally, like, took out her Bible and, like, opened it up and she's like, well, let's see what the Bible says. And that at that time was something that was like a click in my brain that was like, okay, maybe I'm not going to be, Bible girl right now, but someday I want to be somebody that the Bible is applicable to those everyday little situations. And so that really stuck with me, and just how she continued to love me and to pour into me over the years throughout my middle school years was just a huge turning point in my own faith. Like Andy, I was in the 7th grade, was away from home one night when I received a phone call saying that my dad was going to be rushed into surgery the next morning because he had cancer. Unlike Andy's situation, my dad's cancer wasn't nearly as complicated or as severe. It was still not a pleasant time, and he endured it like a trooper. But my dad and I have always been really close. We have a really special relationship, and so that was a moment in my life that fear just kind of took over. And I don't even think that it was until I was a little bit older, maybe into high school, that I could look back and really acknowledge just how afraid I was during that time of my life.
So high school for me, I was a pretty average church-going kid. In fact, I probably stood out. I'd say I was pretty bold with my faith. I had a cross shaved in the back of my head. It was really cool to have like half your head shaved at the time, and I had a cross shaved in there. And so, so I go.
I'm glad that you grew out of that.
Thanks. But I did lead Bible studies at the church or at the school. I was involved in prison ministry, which is something not really heard of. Like I would go to the prisons and do Bible studies with people in the prison, and even the prisoners were like, "This is crazy." Like when I was your age, I was out partying. Like I wasn't in the prison talking about Jesus. However, on the outside, what I looked like, I was super Christian. I always found my value with having a girlfriend. Like you probably never saw me without a girlfriend at that time. And I was also struggling with lust and porn. And I also had a big anger problem. So while the outside looked squeaky clean, the inside was pretty dirty.
And so as I grew up and went to high school, I was super involved in the music program at my school. So I was in the top choir, I was a section leader for marching band, and then for my youth group I'd been asked to be a student leader, and so I started finding my value in all of these achievements and these things that I thought that I had done to earn all of these, accolades. And that kind of turned me into, there was a school Julie and there was a youth group Julie. And it wasn't that I was leading a double life, it's just that I wasn't completely honest in either of those situations. When I was at school, I would go along with what my friends were saying or doing and not necessarily stand up for what I knew was right and say, no, that's wrong, or I would say things that as soon as I would say them, they just was like, why did I just say that, or treat people in ways that was like, that wasn't Christ-like at all. And then when I was at youth group with my friends, then it was the complete opposite. I was only going to put the best that was out there. I didn't want them to see, that I struggled and that I, would say and do things that I wasn't very proud of. And so I had a desire to live an upright life, but my follow-through was definitely lacking. And so went through high school and still had that one really good friend, Amanda. And, I'll let you talk about college before I go into college.
Awesome. Okay. So I went to a Christian college in Lincoln, Illinois. I tried majoring in youth ministries and missions, and because I switched to two different ones, I realized both of those weren't for me. Right off the bat, I found that I went back to the way I was in high school, that I needed to have a girlfriend. Like my value was having somebody right there with me, a girl. So I started dating this girl right off the bat in college, and shortly after that I got engaged to her because, that's what you do, and I knew that I wanted to have a girl because that gave me value. She didn't have the same values and morals that I did, and that had an effect on me morally. Did some stuff that I wasn't proud of, and my mom and dad didn't really like her either. But they continued to pray that God's will would be done. Shortly after that, we broke up. So we were engaged and we broke up. This shattered me to my core because I figured that I was just my value came from her, not from Jesus like it should have. And so when she broke up with me, it shattered me. But true to my nature, I started dating another girl shortly after that. So I did 2 years of college right then. But after that, I went to what we call mission year. So it's a year-long mission trip in the inner city. I was specifically in Philadelphia. God used this year to form some really good relationships with me, relationships that I had, and it taught me that all people matter to Him. I grew closer to Him throughout this year. had some really cool relationships with some homeless people, some just really poor, down and out people, and was able to use this year to just see that that all people matter to God, and so I got to worship and do life with some of the people who had a different culture than I, and it was really good in forming who I was as a Christian. I came home from that year and got engaged to that girl that I was dating before I started. So yes, if you're counting, that was two engagements. She was really godly, and my parents did really like her. But shortly after that, we broke up. She said I felt like God didn't want her to marry me, and this almost killed me literally. She lived like 3 hours from where I was living. I was going to see her that weekend. I just got down to her, and she said we need to talk. I don't really know how I made it back home, because I just remember thinking I could just pull off the road, like just run my car into this ditch. So I really don't know how I got home that day. Looking back on it, though, I can see how the drive home was only by God's grace that I made it home. I knew He wasn't done with me, and He had some more things to teach me.
So when I left for college, I was unsure of what I wanted to do and where I wanted to go. I loved history, and so I thought, I'll go get a history degree. But I didn't want to teach, and my parents were like, no, if you're going to go pay for a degree, you're going to like pair it with something so you can have a job later, because people don't just get jobs when they have a history degree. So my dad convinced me that I also needed to get a business degree. So I went away to Indiana Wesleyan with that one really good friend I had, Amanda. And a few weeks after we got to college, I started talking to Amanda's cousin. And a few weeks after that, I started dating Amanda's cousin. And it was really interesting. My parents actually brought this person up tonight at dinner, not necessarily knowing that I was going to be talking about this tonight. But at that point in time, I was away from home. I was away from all of the people that knew me, and nobody cared about my accomplishments and my achievements from high school. And so I thought, you know what? Like, I don't really care anymore. Nobody knows me. I'm going to set out and make a new life for myself and be my own person. And so I kind of went into my own mini rebellion and started dating this guy who did not have the same upbringing that I did not have the same values. He said he was a Christian, but it was only in name. He was on a campus far away from mine, and so I went to his campus several times and got into the partying scene, and then would drive back on Sunday afternoon to my little Christian bubble, campus, and just feel like this is not who I want to be, but it felt like I was kind of stuck in that cycle of sin. And so it was a few months after I started dating him and going through this that one night the Lord just really convicted me. I was in my dorm room. My roommate Amanda was already asleep, and I just when the Holy Spirit is really working on your heart. I mean, it was just a heaviness, and so I instantly picked up my phone, called this guy, and said, I'm breaking up with you. I'm really sorry to do this over the phone. I'll don't really have any explanation, and we can talk later. And just started reading my Bible, and I started reading in 1 Peter, and I don't really know how I ended up there, but I started reading in 1 Peter, and several hours later I was several more books down to the Bible, and it was just like God had really just opened my eyes to the fact that the Bible is a letter that was written to me, it was for me. And the one thing that really stuck out to me was 1 Peter 1:13-15. And it says, therefore, with minds that are alert and fully sober, set your hope on the grace to be brought to you when Jesus Christ is revealed at his coming. As obedient children, do not conform to the evil desires you had when you lived in ignorance. But just as he who called you is holy, so be holy in all you do. And that just really became my mantra. It was like, hey, I'm going to do this. If I'm going to say that I follow Jesus, I'm going to do it all the way. And so I just really wanted to be holy. And in that, decided that I wasn't going to date. I had not been into the whole dating thing through high school. Had dated just that one other dweeb of a dude. And so I just thought, you know what, Lord, when the right person comes along that I'm supposed to marry, you will open my eyes, and we will both know that that's what it's meant to be. And not that we wouldn't date at that point, but until I'm fully confident that I'm actually going to marry this person, I'm just not even going to put my heart out there to be hurt again. So it was about this time that roommate Amanda, who was my best friend from school, and my best friend from my youth group, who was a guy named Corey, Corey started coming to my campus to visit me, and then he came back the next weekend to visit me, and then the next weekend after that, he came back to visit Amanda, and then the next weekend, Amanda, and then pretty much from then on out, he was coming to visit, but he was not spending any time with me, and he was now dating my friend Amanda. And that ended up being like really awesome because I got to have both of my best friends on my campus. He transferred to our school. And then shortly after he transferred, his cousin started to come to visit him, and then he came to visit him, and then the next weekend he came to visit me, and then the next weekend he came to visit me, and so before long, Andy was in the picture. Andy would be the cousin of my best friend. The two best friends that are now dating, Andy is the cousin of the guy, Corey. And so this was just within a matter of a couple of months of me deciding that I was going to put my foot down and I was not going to be interested in any other guy, and now this guy is pursuing me pretty hardcore, and
I didn't know that you weren't dating at that time.
Yeah. Somehow the memo got lost. And so I really pretty much was just like putting my foot down, like, no, I'm not going to do this, and then people just kept speaking into my life, like, you need to at least pray about it. You need to at least think about it. And after so many people that I really trusted and that I knew were godly Christian people kept saying the same thing over and over, I thought, okay, all right, Lord, like, if this is what you want, then I will pray, but really I don't think that this is for me. Sorry. And so the cool thing about Andy was that because he had spent so much time in Elkhart County through his growing up with his extended family while his mom was sick, we had actually been able to know of each other growing up. And so I remember Andy, I was probably in the second grade, so you would have been in
Sixth.
something like that.
I'm older than she is.
Yeah, so I remember him coming, but he always like made sure that I knew that he was older and cooler, and that, yeah. And so now to have him come and be like, yeah, it was a little bit weird. But it was cool because I knew his background. I knew some of his upbringing. I knew that our families were very similar, and so I started to get to know Andy, and he really wanted to start dating, and I said, no, not yet, I need to pray about it. So we just continued to get to know each other, and went back as we were talking and realized that the day that I broke up with the dweeb boyfriend, Andy had also broken up with his previous girlfriend also. And so it wasn't like that was a sign from God, but it was just like another confirmation that the Lord really was working in those details in our lives.
So since I was forced to wait, God was really using this time and showed me just how much that I needed to find my value in Him and not in relationships. And so our relationship was really different. Was different than any other that I had ever had before. Even before we started like dating, our friendship was different than any other relationship that I had had before. I was honest with her, and because I knew that my value was in God and not based on her, I was able to share some of my struggles with porn and lust that I had, and so we were able to be open and honest with each other. Once Julie finally was on board with our relationships, we had so many
Relationship, but we only had
Sorry,
one
yes,
relationship.
we moved forward and started dating each other. We had a lot of confirmations, like she said. It was just overwhelming. Like, yes, you guys should be dating. So we started dating, and then about 1 year later, we got married.
So that was pretty quick. That once we both were under the understanding that this relationship was heading somewhere, that things fell into place, and so after all of that struggle for me trying to figure out what I was going to do with my degree, it got chucked out the window, and we started our life. And so I was at Indiana Wesleyan, and Andy was still in Illinois, and so we just could only find jobs here in Elkhart County, so we came back here. We're involved in our church, and we were working with middle school youth, and which is funny now. We were just talking about this weekend, looking back our first time around with middle schoolers. We were completely unqualified to be with them because we really weren't that far removed from their age. But we loved that, and we were able to start forming relationships, good friendships with other married couples. And so from those friendships, we started a group that was meeting together for intentional community. And out of that group, there was a calling to start a church. And so we started Exodus Community. I made sure that these were in here. And that was a time of really this intentionally living together in the everyday situations of life. There was a group, there's 4 couples, and when we started meeting, there was our son Micah, and now between the 4 couples, there's
15 kids.
There's a lot of kids. And so it was just those early days of really digging into God's Word together and really just sharing each other's hearts and really forming what our faith was really going to be for us. Were just really special days. It was a time of a lot of growth for us as individuals and for us as a couple, and obviously a lot of growth in our family as well.
So Julie had mentioned quickly about our kids, but in 2005 we had our first son Micah, and then shortly after that we had Eli, and then a few years later we had Reagan. And then a few years into our marriage, I went to an intensive Christian men's weekend and allowed God to show me exactly how I could be sold out for Him. I was done with this kind of being a Christian on the outside but not on the inside. So during that weekend I allowed Him to show me where I could be sold out for Him. He helped me overcome my struggle with lust and porn during that weekend because of the things that he had revealed to me. And so fairly shortly into our marriage, I was a changed man that was sold out for God because I allowed him to show me where I lacked for him.
And Andy went away on this weekend. It was in Kansas City. And so he got back late in the middle of the night. And leading up to that, I had really just been praying for Andy, knowing his struggles, and just praying that the Lord would really just release him from that bondage. And when he crawled into bed that night, I am usually a pretty heavy sleeper, but I woke up, was glad to know that he was home, but I could feel that he was a different person. I knew that he was changed. And so that was a really amazing turning point in our marriage. Now at this time, we lived in a fairly new subdivision. It was a housing development that had, it was 60% new builds by private individuals, and then 40% were new builds by Habitat for Humanity. And our plan was that we would live there 5 years. We'd sell that house and we'd move to something a little bit bigger. That was about the same time that the economy tanked, and so we were stuck there for longer than we had planned. Because the economy tanked, then all of those homes that had been built by Habitat, all of those parents were struggling to find jobs. All of those kids were being left home alone, unattended for days at a time, it seemed. And we knew that there was a lot of illegal activity going on in our neighborhood, and at this time we had some really, really little kids. And we were really uncomfortable there. Just because we knew that there was stuff going on, and we felt like we had followed all the right avenues to let authorities know that there were things going on, and they just could never catch the bad guy. It was within a couple years of all that activity starting that our next door neighbor was killed in the commission of a felony while he was robbing somebody's house. The homeowner was home and shot and killed him. We watched this kid grow. We knew the potential that he had. He was a good kid. Just made some really stupid decisions. And then a few months after that, we found bullet holes in the side of our home. And so out of fear, we decided that it was time for us to go. That we needed to move someplace that would be safe. where we could keep our family safe, where we could keep our family whole. And so we put our house on the market and we waited what seemed like forever because the economy still was not great at that point in time. And finally our house sold, and so we moved to what we thought would be the safest place on earth, Millersburg, Indiana. Actually, we live between Millersburg and Ligonier. We don't have any close neighbors, so we went from living on a postage stamp to we're surrounded by cornfields.
And cows.
And cows. And so, yeah. About that time, when I shared in front of the whole church, about that time we found out that I was pregnant, that we were surprised that we were going to be having our 4th baby. And so that kind of accelerated our process because we needed to get a house, we needed to get ready, we needed to get into it because we have a due date coming up. Do you have anything else?
No.
Okay, so I'm ready to go into that. Okay. So we had made this move in order to keep our family safe. And we moved into our house on April 5th of 2014, and my due date was April 24th. And I have had all of my babies early, and so we really felt like we were cutting like the line, like we needed to get into this house like 2 weeks ago. And so April 5th we moved in, and April 7th I went to just my regular routine midwife appointment, and everything checked out fine. Baby's heart rate was great. You know, it was feeling a little bit sick. I had a little bit of a stomach bug, and I thought, well, it could just be the start of labor. It could just be, you know, something that's going around. So really just kind of hold ourselves up while I was unpacking and trying to get as healthy as possible for delivery. And so that was a Monday that I went in and got checked and everything was fine. And then that Thursday, I had noticed that our daughter, we found out we were having a girl. Her name is Macy. We found out that, no, we didn't find out. I noticed that her movements had started to slow down, but again, I thought, I'm probably going to be popping this baby out any day now, and so it was not, you know, that big of a deal. By Friday, when her movements were still pretty sluggish and not at all, she was a very, very active baby, not at all what I was used to, I laid down to do a kick count, which is basically you lay down for an hour, maybe drink some juice to kind of give the baby a jolt of energy, and get them to move, and then you want to have like 10 good movements over the course of an hour or two. And so I knew that if I called my midwife, that that's what she was going to tell me to do, so I just went ahead and did it on my own, so that way when I called her, I could say, I've already done this, no big deal. And so I laid down and did the juice, and after 2 hours, I had 3 good movements. And so I knew that wasn't probably quite right, but I didn't really still think it was that big of a deal. All of our best friends had gone away for a weekend away in Grand Rapids, so they had already left. They were in Grand Rapids having a great time, and so I called my midwife, and she said, well, you know, it's Friday, it's after hours, probably everything is fine, it's not that big of a deal, but go up to the hospital and we'll just do a quick non-stress test, and then you'll be good until you come back into the office on Monday. So we called our friends and just said, hey, like, this is what we're doing, we'll let you know how it goes, but it's probably no big deal. Took our older kids up to my parents' house, dropped them off, and then we were like, hey, we should really get up to the hospital, but I really like Dairy Queen double cheeseburgers. And so we're like, you don't have any kids, let's quickly go get a double cheeseburger before we go to the hospital. And so we did that and kind of took our sweet time, not really thinking that there's any really real immediate danger or anything. Got to the hospital and they hooked me all up. They do a non-stress test. They put 2 bands across your belly, and one is to measure contractions and one is to measure the baby's heart rate, right? Yes. And so the nurse got me all hooked up, and she just kept like fumbling around with it and almost acting like she didn't know what to do with it. And I was like, poor girl, like she's new, and they bring her in here, and now she's, you know, just having this hard time. She acted really nervous, and she said, I don't think that this one is working. And so I thought, oh, okay. She's like, so I'm gonna go and I'm gonna find another set of equipment. And so I was like, oh, that's fine. And so she walks out of the room, and I look over at Andy in the corner, and he had caught on much sooner than I did that it wasn't that there was anything wrong with the equipment, it was that she couldn't find our baby's heartbeat. And so he was like, well, why would she not be able to find the heartbeat? Why would that be? And I was like, I don't know. I mean, it's not that uncommon for, especially with that pregnancy, for the doctor or the nurse to have a hard time. She was a very active baby, and so she was constantly moving. We never found her heartbeat in the same spot more than once, and so I was just like, I don't know, it's any number of reasons. And so while that nurse was out in the hall, she had bumped into one of the doctors that practices in the same office that I go to see my midwife, and so he grabbed a portable ultrasound machine, and he came in and started doing an ultrasound, and so words that you never ever will forget. He's looking all around, and it's just really quiet, and he just says, without even looking at us, he's still looking at the screen, you're really not going to like what I'm about to tell you. And it was in that moment that it was just, for me, everything all came together. I finally understood what was going on. And he said, I'm not seeing a heartbeat. And I had always assumed in those kinds of moments that, like you see on TV, like people screaming, and like I knew that I should have some sort of reaction, but I just was like suddenly out of the room. And so I was like thinking like, okay, like I should have some reaction. I need to let them know that I understand what they just said. And so like I remember like laying there, and like my hand just felt like it weighed 100 pounds, and like it's like, okay, I at least need to like, okay. And so all I could do was just get my hand to my mouth. I didn't cry. There was just nothing. Andy, on the other hand, is very emotional anyway, and he made sounds that I hope I never hear from any human being ever again, but especially from my husband. So the doctor was incredible. He's just said, we're calling up an ultrasound tech so we can get a better look at what's going on. He said, but he turned the screen around and he showed me everything, and she was very still, and he turned on the color. And so what that does when you have a beating heart and they turn on the color, you can literally see the oxygenated blood. So you can see like red blood and then the blue unoxygenated blood going through the heart, and there was no color. And he said, if I saw even a trace of color, he said, we would be knocking you out and running you down the hall for an emergency C-section. He said, but I don't see anything, and we're going to have the other ultrasound tech come up because that's their job and that's really what they do, and they're the ones that will give us the final go ahead, but right now we need to be praying for a miracle. And inside I was thinking like, you're right, we need a miracle, but it's not going to happen. Like I just knew that there was nothing that was going to change the outcome. So we then are left with the task of, okay, well now what? We had 3 older kids who were eagerly anticipating this new baby that was not in our plans, and so they really were excited to have this new one. And my sisters were all ready for the phone call of, okay, I'm in labor, hurry and get to the hospital. And my parents, and then all of our friends who were away for the weekend. And so we started making those phone calls, and honestly don't remember the conversations that we had, but I know that my parents raced to the hospital. Andy's parents lived in just south of Indy at the time, and they immediately started throwing things into a bag to get to us as fast as possible. And our incredible friends who were on their weekend away, they didn't have their kids, and they didn't have to leave everything to come and be with us, but they did. They just left, walked out of dinner. That poor waiter. I think about what did they even say to him? Like, quick, put our food in a box. Like I don't even know. And so we were just immediately surrounded by people who loved us so well. And so we decided that we needed to get our kids to the hospital so we could talk to them and explain to them what had happened, and we wanted them to be as involved in the process as possible. So we brought them up and we explained to them that we remember when we went and we had an ultrasound and we could see Macy's heart was beating. Remember when we found out that she was a girl? Well, Mommy just had another ultrasound and we looked at her heart and her heart isn't beating anymore. And so that means that she's living with Jesus now. Even though her body is still inside of Mommy, she's living in heaven with Jesus. And then we talked to them about how Mommy's going to go ahead and have her, and then once her body is here, she won't be alive, but we're still going to get to hold her, and we're going to try to love her as much as we can in the time that we have. So I went ahead and I was induced right away. And it took, my body was not ready to go into labor, which was very unusual for my other pregnancies. So it took almost 24 hours before we were finally able to deliver her. And as soon as she was born, man, she was just the most beautiful, perfect little thing I have ever seen. My other babies I thought were pretty cute, but there was just like this heavenly peace about her that is unexplainable. And so they put her on my chest and there was nothing. There was, no cries. She didn't open her eyes. And I just remember yelling. I don't know if I yelled. I felt like I yelled, I wanted you so bad. And so we had our kids come right away, and our families and our friends came, and we, gave her a bath and wrapped her up and, dressed her up, and my mom painted her toenails, and we took pictures with her. And I know that some people think that that's kind of morbid, but that was all that we had. That's all that we will ever have with her on earth. And so those pictures are some of our most cherished possessions. And so we have her with us for about 24 hours. And then a funeral home comes, and you have to give your brand new little perfect baby to somebody that they're going to go take them and put them in the freezer. And honestly, I don't know how we walked out of the hospital that night, but we did. And God was just really good. And I don't say that cheaply. We were able to see from the beginning that He was with us, and that the naivety that I had of not being able to put things together, that something was seriously wrong with our baby. I mean, that was, He was protecting me until that moment that I could take it. And then shock swept in, and that was a gift, because there was no way I could handle everything that I was truly feeling at that point in time without that shock. And our friends who had camped out just waiting for us to have this little girl, and then they planned her funeral for us, and they went and got our kids' clothes to wear to the funeral, and just a million of those little details. It's like we could see how God was working in every one of those people and helping us along the way. And so when we got back to our house, which we had lived in for just a few days, and I was really thinking over, we moved here to try to keep our family safe and to keep our family whole. And it was just like, God, do I even know you? Isn't this your plan? And it was a few weeks later that I came across this quote, and it's by C.S. Lewis, and I don't remember which book it is in literature. I think it's in The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. I think. Matt can correct me if I'm wrong. And it's this character is a beaver, and he's talking about Aslan, who is the king. And so he's talking, and he says, "Safe? Who said anything about safe? Of course he isn't safe, but he is good. He's the king, I tell you." And I came across that, and it was just like, yes, I have a choice right now. I can continue to whine about the fact that God didn't keep my family whole the way that I had envisioned it, or I could embrace the fact that He is good, and He is providing, and He is sustaining us, and He is the king, and it is up to Him to say who lives and who dies and when. And so that was really transformative for me to realize that we thought we were moving our family to safety, but safety is really just an illusion, that we have no control over that. So I talked a little bit about Macy's funeral, and another thing that has really stuck with us is the fact that Macy was buried on Good Friday. And that's just really been a great picture for us that as a people, when we think of the Easter weekend, we think of the horrible crucifixion and death of Jesus on Friday and his burial. And then by Sunday, we have the joyous celebration that he is risen and that all things are made right. As a people, we live in the Saturday. And, I think about Jesus' disciples, like what were they thinking and what were they doing on Saturday? Like, that's the realization that we all live in right now, that we trust that Jesus is going to come back and he's going to make things okay. And that someday we will get to, love on Macy, and we will get to, I hope that we get to, she's still a baby, and I still get to change her diapers in heaven, and I get to, sing her lullabies and those sorts of things. But even if I don't, that whatever God has planned for that is so much better than what I can plan. And so it was just really symbolic for us to actually have her funeral and her burial on Good Friday, and to remind us that Easter is coming, and Easter really will never be the same for us. It's just so much more real and authentic. So
yeah, I think, that first Easter after Macy died, it just changed my whole perspective. Like before that, I was living here on earth, and after that, I felt like I just can't wait to get to heaven. Like Jesus is King. He did save me and came and died for me. However, I think I still was grieving, even though it was Good Friday and Easter, and I knew that God was good. I still was grieving, and I found myself outside having to do anything, something. It didn't really matter. Like, I'm not really, those of you who know me, especially my father-in-law knows, I can't really build anything, but I was like wanting to do something with my hands. I just wanted to be outside and do something just because I needed to do something.
you even went and bought like 15 baby chicks just so
Yeah.
you could have something to take care of.
Yeah. And then we had and a lot of times that was included I was outside yelling and crying, and it was a good thing we were living in the middle of nowhere because I was yelling quite loud sometimes. I also remember I had one friend who called me, and I just remember standing outside, walking around the fence of our property edge, just talking to him about Macy and what was going on in my head. Although I still felt alone, and as a man, I didn't have any other men who really I felt had experienced lost their child like this, and because men just don't share their feelings. But and I was really appreciative for the one man who did talk to me and ask me how I was feeling. I was angry, and it really took me a long time to admit that I was angry at God. Growing up, I knew that God was good, and I knew that that He loved me, and that really conflicted in my heart right at the time because if He really loved me, I didn't know how He allowed my daughter to die. And then I finally realized it was okay to admit to God that I was mad at Him. And once I did this, I just felt like a relief that came over me, and I was able to allow God to heal me and just realize that He still was good, even in the midst of this. It was we live in a fallen and broken world, and it's not He didn't choose to take my daughter from me, but because of sin and because of just the world we live in. That's the reality. So I was able to allow God to heal me like that once I was able to admit that I was angry.
And so Andy and I grieved a lot the same, which I think is really uncommon for couples from what we've encountered now that we've met so many other people that have also experienced the same type of loss. Any loss. Couples generally tend to not grieve in sync. Not that we were in sync all the time, but there was a lot of things that we did. He's more of an emotional man than I think most are, and so so that was really good that we were together in that. And yet I still, as a mom who, if there was anybody on this earth who could have saved Macy, it should have been me. And so I still felt I was had a lot of guilt, and then still felt very isolated and really alone. We had incredible friends who sought us out and didn't allow us to just kind of hole up and be on our own, but there just wasn't really anybody that I could just be like, okay, like I am dying from this guilt and I think I might go crazy, like literally crazy. Is that normal? Like there just wasn't anybody that I could talk to about it because nobody else had gone through what I had gone through. I really felt like there was only two people that I could like be completely real with were my mom and Andy. And at the same time, I'm at home with my kids all day. We homeschool, and so I wanted to be as authentic in my grief with them as was healthy for them. And so I wanted them to know when I was having a tough day or when I was having a good day, but I could not be as broken as I was in front of them all the time. And so that made it really difficult for me to kind of process some of my grief because it was limited to basically when they were in bed, and by the time they were in bed, then I was worn out from the day and it was just easier to just try to go to sleep. And so I actually thought I had done a pretty decent job of not letting them know how broken I was in the evenings after they had gone to bed, but it came out recently from them that, yeah, we know, you would put us to bed and then you'd go cry in the shower. We could hear you. And I just thought it was really sweet that they kind of protected my dignity and didn't let me know at the time. And yet just was really grateful that even though I thought I was doing the best, and hiding all of that grief from them, that the Lord still was able to work through where I was, I don't know, thinking I was helping them out, but maybe wasn't necessarily, I don't know. And so, so Andy and I grieved differently and yet a lot the same. We also had decided pretty early on that we were going to be very intentional about our grief. We had heard all sorts of crazy statistics about couples that lose a child and the divorce rate, and some are outrageous and say 90%, and some say, oh no, it's only
60 or 70.
Yeah.
And still,
but it's a pretty good percentage, and so we knew that we were going to be intentional. We were not going to let this tear our family apart because we knew that there was nothing that the enemy wanted more than to destroy more, and so we didn't want that to destroy our marriage. So we were really intentional about communicating and letting each other know, like, hey, I'm thinking about Macy right now, or hey, I'm gonna swing by the cemetery, or that sort of thing. And our home, which we had thought would be our sanctuary away from the rest of the world, actually just became our sanctuary to where we could just cry and say or do whatever we needed to do and let the other one just kind of be in their grief and not be judged by that, not have to worry about what they were thinking. And so our home really just kind of became our little house in the great big field that was just kind of solitude and a way for us to escape. We also did our best, we didn't do perfect, but we did our best not to place expectations on the other one in their grief. I didn't feel like Andy needed to, put me back together. I knew that wasn't his place, and I don't think that he ever felt like I needed to put him back together or anything like that. So grief is just a whole monster of its own. It's not something that we're over at this point. Macy would be turning 4 this April, so almost 4 years into this journey. It's not something that we can just say, yeah, that's behind us. It's something that we carry with us every day. However, it's something that 4 years in, we're getting better about carrying with us. It's not quite so big and bulky and awkward, and it still rears its head, but at this point in time when it rears its head, we're not surprised. We know that it's going to creep up whenever it wants to creep up, and we just kind of ride with it at that point in time. So grief is just going to be an ongoing part of our story, and it's something that we can allow the Lord to continue to pull us closer to Him, and that's a choice that we have to make.
Yeah, we utilize several different support groups and retreats and counseling to help us learn how to continue living, even though our hearts still are broken. We've been able to continue living in that. And because of Macy's death, I think that I've come to an understanding more fully what it means to follow God with all that I am and trust in Him. So because of that struggle that we went through, I'm more committed to Christ now than I've ever been before.
So, so in that still early phase of figuring out how to do grief, we decided that we were not going to let Satan have the last word in our family, and that we were going to go ahead and try to have another baby. And so about a year after Macy passed away, I found out that I was pregnant with our daughter Hattie. Unless you have experienced a pregnancy after loss, it's really hard to describe what that experience is like. But where I thought that I was probably in a pretty stable spot, now I have extra hormones being added on top of that. Plus, I was just incredibly consumed with fear and anxiety, and honestly, most of the time just felt dread about the pregnancy, which was so weird because I wanted it so badly. And then when it happened, it was like, I'm not sure I really want this. And then the guilt of how could I say I don't want this? This is a baby. This is a gift. And it's just really complicated. So I really struggled to look forward to her birth. Yeah, it was just really difficult and complicated. And so when we went in to have our anatomy scan for her, we found out that she was a girl. The ultrasound tech started acting really funny again. And I was like, here we go, like I knew something wasn't right. And then we get done with the ultrasound appointment, and the ultrasound tech, Andy needed to go back to work, and she's like, well, is your husband staying for your appointment? And I was like, no, like, should he? And she didn't really give me an answer, and just kind of walked down the hall, and I was just like, oh, this is not good. My mom was with me for that appointment, and our daughter Reagan was there as well, and so we went to the room to wait for my midwife to come in, and I was hoping that she would just say, yep, ultrasound looks great, she's a healthy little girl, see you in a couple weeks. As we were waiting for that, I told my mom, I said, I know something's not right, and based on what the ultrasound tech kept looking at over and over, I'm pretty sure she has something wrong with her face. And so my midwife came in, who was my incredible, amazing midwife who also delivered Macy, came in, and I could tell again by the look on her face that things were not quite right. And she said, well, I have good news and I have bad news. The bad news is your baby has a cleft lip. The good news is this happens 1 in 700 pregnancies. It's like the easiest of the easy birth defects, and it's fixable. And so, at the time I was like, oh, okay, like it's just a lot to process and go through. And at first I was really angry at God. It was like, okay, did I not do this with Macy well enough that now you still have more to teach me in all of this? Because I'm really tired of learning things right now. And then once I got over that bitterness and the Lord really worked in my heart, I realized that Hattie that happens all the time. I get all of my kids mixed up. Hattie's diagnosis was really a gift, and that I was having such a hard time planning for what life was going to look like with another baby around, that I was forced into that because now I needed to start looking into hospitals and surgeries and doctors and plastic surgeons. And so it really, the Lord was just so good in that, and that I really just had to throw myself into planning what life would be like with another little baby around. So when we're finally able to have her, we were just filled with so much relief. The first thing I said as soon as she was born was, she's alive. And there was just so much joy, and we had people camped out in the waiting room, and they taught our kids how to gamble with candy. They had all taken a pool, they tossed in candy and said, we think she's going to be born at this time, and no, I think she's going to be born at this time. And so I think Reagan and my mom won the pool of candy for the guests. They were down to it to the minute of when she was born. Our kids were so excited to have her. And Hattie is, if you know Hattie, she is just her own little sunshine. She has brought so much joy to our family. She will never replace Macy. There will always be that longing for Macy in our hearts. And as we've gone through all the milestones with Hattie, we're reminded of the things that we missed out with Macy. And so that's, it's been bittersweet. So Hattie will never, ever, ever replace Macy, and Hattie will always be her own little person. But she is just such a picture for us of God's redemption, and how he really just loves us, and he loves to give us good gifts, and so yeah. So that's our story at this point. It's ever changing. We're leaning into the Lord, and just continuing to listen to His call and say yes to opportunities that He brings up for us, and yeah, that's our story.
We have a few minutes left. Would you want to take questions?
Sure. Yeah.
Anyone has any questions for Andy or
Anything.
Julie?
How did you end up at Clinton Frank?
How did we end up at Clinton Frank? That's a really good question that I don't know we have the complete answer to. Do you wanna-
Sure. So we were at the time, Julie had mentioned the small church that we had started, Exodus. Joel DeMott was one of our good friends who had gone to Exodus. And we came the weekend he was doing his trial preaching, and
just to be a support to him, just to let him know that we loved him.
had an overwhelming sense of that God was calling us here. And for us, that was something that was really hard to even consider, because Exodus had gone through Macy with us, and we'd done a lot of life with them, and so we never thought we were going to leave. But we felt God calling us here, and so we obeyed.
All right, middle schoolers are usually.
It's the quietest thing I've seen you
Yeah.
ever.
The kids, I'm sure they've got questions.
Anything.
Yep.
Yeah.
You're pretty thorough.
Yeah, we have a lot to say, that's for sure.
I think the most amazing statement I heard this evening was when Julie said, God is really good after everything both of you have been through. You lost your beautiful baby girl. And to be able to say that you have to be living a completely surrendered life in order to be able to make that statement and really mean it. It's amazing to me. I'm twice the age you guys are, and you could be my mentor, really. Very, very inspirational, and I just appreciate your willingness to share this evening. It has to be very difficult, very hard.
So that quote was from Lion Ocean of Wardrobe?
Yes.
So where did you come across from it? Or where did you come across it?
I actually just saw it like on a meme on Facebook.
Oh, you saw it on a meme.
Yes, but we have since read the book.
Yeah,
so,
like
yeah.
growing up, I had never read it, and I recently had actually read it. So like it was,
Yeah.
And then, as soon as I read it again, it
Facebook's
struck
not
me.
terrible for everything. There is some good. But read the book if you haven't. It's a good book.
I've read the book, that's why I know it.
Okay.
Anyone else? Any questions, comments?
How did you help your kids through the grieving process while you were processing the same thing?
It was really tough. We told them over and over and over again, like, if there's something you are feeling or something that you just need to say, whether or not you think it's going to hurt us, say
That's
it,
okay.
because we want as long as you keep talking to us, we can keep working through this together. Even if you think it's something that maybe God isn't going to be happy that you said or that you thought or that you felt, let us know, because we can pray about it with you, and we can, dig into our Bibles together.
There was a lot of times too, like a lot of that came out for them at the evening, like as they lay down for
At
bed, like
bedtime.
when they slowed down, and then it really hit them.
And it still does.
Yeah. And-
If they're going to break down, it's still at bedtime.
And our kids said some stuff that hurt, but it was okay.
A lot. But we
we-
wanted to assure
yeah.
them that that's okay. And one of the things specifically that was brought up by one of them was they were upset with me that I should have done something. And so I just told that one, it's like, I know it, I'm feeling the same way, and I'm really sorry, and you just have to trust me that if there was anything that I could have done, I would have done it. And really it was just, I think, for him to be able to get that off of his chest. Because then he was like, I'm really sorry, I don't, as I told him, you don't need to be sorry, that's what you're feeling. And we just always tried to combat what they were feeling with what the truth was, and then really just continue to pray about it. We did also take them to Ryan's place, so they were able to get some some counseling and some time away from us where they could process with other people as well.
I think I can speak on behalf of everybody here and in our congregation. We're just really tickled that you're part of Clinton Frame.
Thank you.
Very happy to have you.
We're
Let's
glad.
give them a round.